My part will be covering kind of the history of the technical team at BFI Southbank. I'm going to go through some various decades that this building's been open, since about 1957. Then Chris will talk to you about kind of the day-to-day operation of the technical team at BFI Southbank and what we do kind of in the contemporary scenarios. And also we're trying to do something a little bit different tonight, which is something we've not done before, so you might have to bear with us, but we thought we'd actually have a live stream of the projection box. So we're gonna make up a reel of film, and we're gonna lace up a projector from the projection booth, and we're gonna stream it onto the screen behind me there. So that could be fun. I mean, it might go horribly wrong, but we'll give it a go. We've got two very experienced projectionists in the booth tonight. We've got Mark Kennedy and John Lowe, who are probably already squirming because I've named them in a public scenario. But we're going to give that a go. So it could be interesting. We'll see how it goes. Before we get started, just a quick overview of the cinema technology team. So there are 25 of us, 3 in the management section, 3 in the content, and 19 projectionists, which most cinemas would probably find quite extreme, really. But it's only 6 full-time projectionists, and we have 13 part-timers. But essentially, it's because we're open from 8 until 11, 7 days a week, as well as kind of the public screenings. We also do a lot of a corporate hire. We do a lot of events, as you can see on the slide there. We do over 1,200 events and hires a year, which is about an average of 3 a day, and 1,200 different titles a year. And it's quite a manual process. It's still quite a manual process. We're all kind of hoping that AI won't be able to take our jobs. I mean, I don't think they're ever going to build a robot that can lace a projector, but you never know. They might be working on it. Quite a niche thing to do. But we still show a lot of our screenings on film, 25 to 35%. And that's, just still a very manual process. And it's something that we've been doing as a department since 1957, essentially. So we're kind of continuing a rich tradition of manual work, making up films, lacing up projectors, running films. But as time has gone on, we've obviously had to kind of increase the commercial side of it. So we do operate during the day more regularly now. And also we run a lot of education events. As you're all members, you probably know most of this, but we have 4 screens here, and we also have a QC suite downstairs with 16 projectors. Most of them are actually film projectors. We've got 3 in the projection box up there, film projectors, one digital projector. We run multiple formats, 70mm, 35mm, 16mm. Obviously, digital cinema is a critical part of our operation now, as you can imagine. So 60-odd% of our titles are digital. And it's not the enemy. We're kind of, we're pragmatic about it. It's not as much fun as film, of course, but it's an essential part of working in a cinema these days, and it's not going anywhere. So we've embraced it as well. And also we're installing the latest projectors as well. We've got laser projectors in NFT1 and NFT4, as well as the standard Xenon projectors. You're probably going to hear the word projector quite a lot tonight and see a few projectors on screen. So without further ado, is our first load of projectors. This is actually the Telekinema. It was operated by the BFI from 1952 on the Southbank as part of the Festival of Britain. This was the first iteration, as some of you would probably know, of the National Film Theatre. And it was opened as a film club and operated by the BFI. And you've got 3 projectionists there looking very smart in their black blazers. I might try and implement that in our team, but they're all a bit maverick, so they probably would refuse. The one on the right actually is Charles Beddoe, who was the technical controller at the BFI for a number of decades. And so he was kind of a thread that ran through the National Film Theatre technical team from the very, very earliest days. And he oversaw the fit out, the installation of the National Film Theatre when it moved to this location, and managed the technical team up until the 80s or early 90s. The BFI Telekinema was proved to be very, very popular. Over 400,000 people visited the site from 1952 to 1957, and it was the forerunner of the National Film Theatre, which opened 70 years ago next year. So this is the classic shot of NFT1 as it is now, which is a beautiful modernist installation, opened in 1957. It was designed as a CinemaScope auditorium. CinemaScope and widescreen was obviously becoming more and more important for cinema projection in the 50s. And it was designed to kind of keep up with the industry, keep up with the latest tech. And it was also opened as a stereo installation as well. So it had magnetic sound as well, which was quite unusual in those days. It's a beautiful modernist room, of course, and it's sadly lost some of that modernist edge since the refurbs that we've had to do over the years. When I first started here in 1998, the timber slatting was still there, but sadly it become quite kind of marked and a bit scummy, and we had to cover it up. Really, it looked like a nuclear bomb had gone off, we used to say, and it just left the shadow of people's heads next to the seats. And also you can see there the famous tabs, which the BFI have used the design of the tabs as a motif ever since. If you look at the carpet, actually, you can see the design has existed in that. But it was a beautiful installation, but sadly, by the time of the late 80s, the mechanism had kind of given up the ghost, and in its final years, it squeaked so badly when it opened that the projectionists used to play recordings of bongos to mask the sound of the squeaking. And apparently, I mean, I have seen a reel-to-reel tape with the recordings on it, but I didn't manage to get them organised for your entertainment tonight. But they had horror bongo, they had thriller bongos, and apparently they had tragic bongos as well. But I don't know what that would sound like. But it was also full of asbestos, as many things were in those days. So it's probably just for the best that it doesn't exist in NFT1 anymore. If you can see the projectors installed there, they were originally installed in the telekinema, and they're Cayley projectors. They've got carbon arc lamp houses. This was the first installation in 1957 in NFT1. And these projectors are still actually going. Initially, in NFT1, there was a preview theatre that kind of looked the other way. It's a 15-seat preview theatre. So they were moved there initially when they were upgraded in 1964. And then after the preview theatre was shut down, they were moved to the archive, and they're now operating in the QC room at the archive. So they're still checking prints 70 years later, which is quite incredible, really. And a testament to how well projectors were built. This is the second iteration of projection system in NFT1. These are carbon arcs. This was the first installation of Victoria 8, Cinemecanica Victoria 8 projectors. They were installed so we could run 70 millimeter. And actually we've got a peerless carbon arc lamp house in NFT1 foyer at the moment. It's not actually one from NFT1. The one in the foyer was salvaged from the Shell buildings, because they had a large cinema at the Shell buildings, and we moved in there and grabbed a load of stuff before they shut it down. I guess that was about 15 years ago. I mean, this once the BFI the NFT was up and running, the operation was fairly set, really. It was quite similar for many decades. It was a lot of 35 mil, of course. So the idea of the work of a projectionist in those days, would you come in, there were 2 projectionists per screen, you'd make up a lot of prints, you'd maintain the projectors, you'd run a lot of prints. But even in this day and age, we had plenty of on-stage interviews. You've got Ingrid Bergman on the right there. And according to Leslie Hardcastle, over 50,000 different features were shown at the NFT between 1952 and 1970. And like I say, this has kind of remained relatively unchanged in the years. I mean, the technology has changed. The daytime operation has changed, but essentially we're doing the same thing that our forebears did decades ago. NFT2 opened in 1970. On the left, you've got an architect's model of the actual installation, and I think they've got it pretty close to how it is. But apparently it was also a technician's nightmare, which you could say it was, but not for the reasons you might think. It was a technician's nightmare because it was so well fitted out. It had 16 millimeter, 35 millimeter. It also had synchronous sound for separate magnetic tracks, so you could run TV prints. So back in those days, we used to run a lot of BBC prints from the BBC archive, which were run on a picture track, a picture reel, and a separate magnetic sound reel. And that equipment is still in the booth. So it also had, in those days, we had interlock stereo 3D in NFT1, and there was NFT2, and there was a silver screen in there. And when I first joined in '98, we used to run interlock 3D screenings in NFT2. There was also the commentary booth as well. So we used to do simultaneous translation of unsubtitled prints. That was something that we still did quite frequently back in the late 90s and the early 2000s. It's happening less and less now because we have soft titling, and also it's just not become part of the program. I think Robert Pullman was he actually worked for Rank, but he was a guy who oversaw the fit out of NFT1 and NFT2. And I think if you could see the amount of tech that we still have operating from his original installation, he'd be surprised. But he'd also be quite surprised by the increasing complexity of the operation in NFT2, because although we operate all the stuff that he originally installed, we've also kind of added lots of digital formats. We've got lots of different AV formats, and so it's actually got more complicated, and you could say more of a nightmare. But we kind of enjoy it. I don't think we see it as a nightmare. This is a former projectionist at the BFI. This is a guy called Don Cole, and he was previously at the Odeon West End, and he was a shift leader projectionist at the NFT until the late 80s. Steve, one of our projectionists who still works here, remembers him, and apparently he was quite a colourful character. But Steve couldn't come up with any stories that I could really relate to now. So let's just say he was an old school, shall we say, an old school kind of. I mean, there have been a few old school projectionists who've worked at the BFI since I've been here, and quite fruity language, etc. But this is Don Cole doing a members tour in the 70s, and that was something that used to happen regularly in the 70s. And as you're all members, I suspect you know that we've restarted the tours, and you're all welcome to join them. We don't look around NFT2 anymore, so if you haven't been on one, we actually run these tours in NFT1, but we have added the projection booth at the IMAX to the tour as well. So it's definitely worth going on a projection tour if you're interested in looking around the projection boxes here. These projectors are again Cinemecanica Vic-8s. It was a real favourite of the BFI. And these projectors were in operation in this booth until 2016. But me and Chris stripped them out in 2016 because they were getting a little worn out. We've actually still got them. They're downstairs in storage downstairs, but we've replaced them with newer Vic-8s back in 2016, which was it's actually the last new projectors that the BFI ever bought, and 35mm projectors, and probably is the last projectors we'll ever buy, as no one makes new ones anymore. So this is quite a nice photo. This is some of the technical team in the late 70s posing in NFT1. I mentioned Charles Beddoe earlier, and he is on the second left. Charles Beddoe was a critical part of the operation here for many decades, and he also founded the Projected Picture Trust. And he rescued a lot of projectors from various cinemas as they were closing throughout the 70s and 80s, and they keep them in storage in a site at Halifax now. And the PPT is still going, still a critical part of the projectionist and the projection engineering landscape of the UK. And Charles Beddoe was a key part of that. Third from the right is a former colleague of ours, Peter Bell, much loved by the technical team. This was late 70s, I believe, but Peter only retired in 2024. And he was a projectionist here from 1970 all the way through to 2024. And still going strong at the age of 76. So he was kind of a big thread through this whole period of kind of memories of working at the BFI. And the guy next to him with the moustache is John Hoskins. And John's son, Simon, is actually a projection supervisor still at the BFI. And Simon's been here since the year 2000. So it's one of those jobs where you kind of come and then you never leave. But that's probably, I guess it's because it's nice here. I don't know. It's not a lack of ambition or anything like that, honestly. It's nice here, that's it. And on the right is Neville Walker, who's a former chief. On the far left, we have Ron, who used to be in the vaults. And next to him, it's Alfie Squires, who was, again, another supervisor here for some time. In the 80s, we expanded the operation. This is some shots of Mommy before it was built. You can see where it's all placed. It was underneath the bridge. It was just a car park for many years, and then Mommy was built. In the image on the right, in the centre of the image at the back, is Leslie Hardcastle, who was the driving force behind Mommy, and NFT controller for many years. Such a key figure in the history of the NFT as well. Very supportive of projectionists, always had good relationships with his technical team, and was deemed to be a good man by everyone who worked with him. He was famously in the projection booth in 1968 when the four horsemen of the apocalypse caught fire, the nitrate print, which gutted the projection box, and he's been recorded talking about that. And apparently a jet of flame about 10 meters wide flew from the top of the projector all the way across the projection box, and everyone just legged it. That was a bit of a mistake, which we definitely try to avoid these days. Now we've restarted our nitrate screenings here. The main reason for that happening was that people hadn't spotted that it was nitrate when they were screening it, and it was made up onto a 6,000-foot spool, which is three reels were spliced together. None of the nitrate fire suppression or kind of fire safety procedures were in place. So it caused a lot of problems. So we're currently in the what was the Mommy Image Workshop. This was the scene of magic lantern shows and Pepper's Ghost demonstrations and actor shows. And also it was running as an extra screen in the evening. As I mentioned before, I joined in 1998, and it was sadly in its death throes, Mommy, when I joined. And Mommy had its own tech team, and there seemed to be some strange kind of rivalry or distrust between the two, which I didn't really understand at the time. But I mean, obviously, I'm sure there were good reasons for it. But in 1999, it was taken over and became NFT3, as it's been ever since. And we've still got some elements from Mommy here. You can't see it now, but up in the ceiling, there's some roll-down screens which were used for Pepper's Ghost, and we also have the silver screen, which was installed back then as well. So it still lives on in some ways, the Mommy cinema. Back to NFT1 again, and I mentioned continuity in the team, and this is an early picture of Steve Gray, who joined the NFT in 1985, and Steve is still with us, running prints after 40 years of service. And this is how I remember the projection booth looking when I first arrived, and it hasn't actually changed radically. It's more equipment has been installed kind of behind Alfie, who's sitting on the left there. This is where I learnt to be a projectionist. Steve trained me up, and I was his second projectionist for about 18 months before I moved to a different venue. Back in those days, you worked in one screen permanently, and there were always two projectionists on each shift every day. Yeah, and more VIC-8s. These are the second set of VIC-8s that were installed in NFT1. I guess you can't really see it, but one of the key operations that changed in the 1990s was the increase of video projection. And downstairs in the booth downstairs, where we currently have the digital cinema projectors, that's where we had digital projectors back then, and we showed a lot more videotapes, which is kind of a forerunner of D-Cinema, I guess. I mean, moving on, the 2000s, that was when things really started to change for the operation here, and that's when 35mm started to kind of was not on its last legs, but its days were a little bit numbered. So in 2000, there was the first digital screening in West End of Toy Story 2, which is considered the first digital cinema projection event. Where we're actually stood now, again, was the digital test bed. So after Mommy closed down, there was a government-funded project which was set up to test out new digital cinema technologies. And there was a room downstairs where all playback servers and various kind of remastering equipment was installed. In the projection booth, various different digital projectors were installed and were operated by the various companies that were in the market to get involved with digital cinema back in the early 2000s. So we had Barco projectors and Christie and NEC projectors. And the projector you see on your right is actually one of the original projectors from the Digital Screen Network. And it's still working in our QC suite downstairs, and it was actually installed there in 2007. So when digital cinema first came out, there was a lot of fear that they'd have to be replacing projectors about every 4 or 5 years, but that one's been there for nearly 20 years. So it's doing very well, I'd say, and people didn't have to worry so much. Most cinemas have replaced their projectors since this period, but there are still a few of them still in operation. And this is just a bit of a timeline for digital cinema's takeover, really. By 2007, we had a digital cinema projector in all 4 screens. A little bit squeezed for space in NFT3 and NFT2. In NFT2, if you've seen films in there, you'll notice we have a gantry in there now. Initially, when the digital cinema projector was installed, it was over to the left, but the keystone on it was absolutely horrendous and it looked terrible. Didn't show digital cinema off in its best light, which maybe would have pleased some projectionists at the time, because basically digital cinema was the portend of their doom. Thousands of projectionists lost their jobs in the years afterwards. That Avatar opened in 2009, and that was a real kind of push for cinemas to install digital cinema projectors. And the real tipping point was 2011, and it was at this point there were more digital screens than there were 35mm screens. It didn't really affect our operations so much. Obviously, digital cinema screenings kicked in a lot more and increased in their number over the years. But we reached a certain point where we didn't stop showing film any more than we had before. It got down to about 25 to 35% in possibly 2011, 2012. And from that point onwards, it didn't really drop anymore, and it's held at that level ever since. And this is down to the fact that people like watching films on celluloid. I mean, and it's got a certain, I mean, much has been said about the kind of the quality of watching a 35mm print. But it's also just about the kind of variety of programs that we have here, and the ability to continue showing prints on film on celluloid is critical to the program. It kind of opens up so many more screenings for us. And if we cease to show 35mm, the program would have to contract. And as you probably know, it's having a bit of a moment, really. In the last sort of 2 or 3 years, it's really kicked back into gear, and people are finding it again, I guess, and appreciating it once more. And we're involved in that as well. And next month we're actually running some training here, where we've gone out kind of nationally to various cinemas who've still got projectors installed and still want to show film, and we're running projectionist training courses, and we've got a cohort of 12 people joining us at Southbank next month, and we're going to be training them up to continue the carrying the torch of 35mm, which is great. And that's really something really pleasing about my role, as I've been able to support that and get involved in that. In the 2010s, I mean, the operation changed slightly. As I've said before, we had more of a daytime operation. We had more commercial budget cuts, and funding freezes have meant that we've had to work as a more commercial operation since about 2006, really. And I included these 3 pictures because they kind of highlight what really happened in NFT1 over that period. On the left, we had what's called a Kineton FP75. I mean, if you've been to any other talks I've done, I've probably spoken about the Kinetons which failed, that we couldn't fix. And they went in 2010, and they were absolutely state-of-the-art electronic projectors. Looked really beautiful on screen, very, very steady picture, but also highly complex. And in 2014, Kineton, as a projector manufacturer, ceased to operate. And from that point onwards, they weren't really able to service the parts anymore. So the central picture is after we'd finally lost patience with Kineton being able to fix the projectors, and we'd stripped them out. And we were operating with one projector for about 6 months in NFT1, which is actually very difficult if you're a cinema that shows archive prints, because generally with archive prints, you can only show them on single reels, which is a 2,000-foot spool. So we weren't able to show archive prints for about 5 months, I think it was, in the end. So we stripped them out, and we had to replace them in 2019, early 2019, with the projectors on the right, which is a Philips DP70. A Philips DP70 is electromechanical, so no electronic parts. And the projectors we installed, we actually found in Denmark, and they were built in 1964. So we went massively back in time to find some equipment that would actually be able to service and sustain into the future. You've got a picture of our engineer's Ed's hands as he's doing some maintenance work on them. And they've been operating in NFT1 since 2019, and yeah, I mean, they've been incredibly reliable, actually. So it's been a great process for us. We've finally said goodbye to the VIC-8s, but the VIC-8s have kind of shifted around the building, and the VIC-8s from NFT1 are now in NFT3, and we'll get a closer look at them a bit later when we get up into the box. And my final slide is just kind of the present, really. This is old and new side by side. You've got a Christie 4K projector on the right and a Cinemecanica VIC-8 on the left. And this is our main operation, really. We run film all the time. We run digital all the time. And all the technicians and projectionists here have to have knowledge of how to do everything, really.